Story time of when I was accused of rape. Joseph was just sold into slavery by his brothers, and those Midianites he sold him to actually ended up taking Joseph to Egypt, and he was sold to Potiphar, which was the captain of Pharaoh. The Lord was with Joseph, and so everything that Joseph did in Potiphar's house, he succeeded at. And you know who else noticed that? Potiphar. And this made Potiphar really happy, so he made Joseph his personal attendant. So Potiphar making Joseph his personal attendant meant he was over his house and everything he owned. And from the moment that Joseph took over everything Potiphar owned, the Lord blessed Potiphar for the sake of Joseph. Everything in Potiphar's house began to flourish because of Joseph. So then Potiphar gave full administrative responsibility to Joseph. Joseph took such good care of Potiphar, he didn't have to worry about anything except for what he wanted to eat. Potiphar was living for Joseph. Now keep in mind, Joseph wasn't ugly. He was handsome and he was well built. So Potiphar's wife quickly took notice of that. Being a very forward woman, she tells Joseph, come on, come sleep with me. Joseph's like, I beg your pardon? I think not. My master trusts me. Why would I sleep with his wife? Master has entrusted me with everything in his home, and he has held nothing back from me except for you because you're his wife. Why would I do that to him? How could I do such a wicked thing against my master? How could I do such a sinful thing against God? And she kept laying it on him very thick like. And he just had to do everything in his power to avoid her at this point. One day, when no one was around, she grabs Joseph by his cloak and pulls him close to her and is like, sleep with me. And this man is like, unhand me, wench, and pulls out of his cloak and runs away and leaves his cloak in her hands. She realized Joseph left his cloak. She called to her servants and says, my husband has brought in this Hebrew slave to make a fool of us. He came in to try to rape me, and when he heard me scream, he left, but he left his cloak behind. Trifling. She kept Joseph's cloak until her husband returned. Then she tells her husband the same story. That Hebrew slave you brought in, yeah, he tried to rape me, and when I screamed, he ran away, but he left his cloak. And so she shows Potiphar Joseph's cloak. So naturally, Potiphar was infuriated and decided to throw Joseph into prison without even asking Joseph his side of the story, because remember, he's just a slave. And so Joseph was thrown into prison where all of the king's prisoners were thrown into. The Lord still found favor on Joseph even in jail. One thing the story taught me is that when you follow Jesus and when you follow the will of God, goodness and mercy chase you down, baby, just like it says in Psalm 23. And when you begin to move in purpose, when you begin to follow God, you begin to move in purpose, which causes expedited elevation, even in moments where you shouldn't be elevated. And as you begin to move in purpose, as you continue to move in your call, those around you reap the harvest of your obedience. The thing is, though, and this is what catches us slipping, when we're following God and we're about kingdom's business, we also have to be aware of the enemy's tactics, which is to deter us from living out our purpose, which is to remove us from having hope in Christ Jesus. One of the things that really stood out to me was when Joseph was telling that hood rat that he didn't want to sleep with her because he had already found favor with his master, right? And that it would be a great sin, not only against his master, but against God. And this is what Proverbs 3:6 was saying when he says, acknowledge me in all your ways. When you acknowledge God in the midst of temptation, it makes it a lot harder to follow through with that temptation, because it's like, what would God think of me in this moment? What would God say if I were to give into this temptation right now? How would this separate me from God? How would this hurt my master's heart if I were to follow through with this lust, with this, with smoking, with cursing, with being drunk? How would this affect my relationship with Christ? When you consider God, it helps you fight off the temptations. We're true followers of Christ. Our character should be Jesus, regardless of who's watching. And even in the midst of suffering, there is still purpose. Even when Joseph was thrown into jail, he still found favor with God. No matter where the Lord places you, serve unto him, and he will find favor on you. I realized I didn't even finish the story. So after Joseph was thrown into jail, he actually finds favor with the warden there, and ends up in high ranking in jail. He was put in charge over all the prisoners. And you know what? The warden of the prison didn't have to worry about anything because Joseph did everything for him. Even in jail, Joseph found favor from God because he understood what it meant to serve right there. Because he understood what it meant to serve wherever God places you. In the midst of chaos, God is still with you. In the midst of chaos, we have to remember to always include God. In chaos, in easiness, in comfort and discomfort, include God in every area. How different would it have been for Joseph if Joseph threw a pity party for being thrown in jail for something he didn't do? He was right to feel that way. But instead, what did he do? He chose to serve God anyways. And because he chose to serve God anyways, despite what he thought or felt, God found favor on Joseph. And because God found favor on Joseph, God began to find favor with those around him. And even in the midst of a hopeless situation, gave Joseph hope. I'm convinced that a lot of our disappointment with God comes from us trying to tell God how things should be. And then when it doesn't go that way, we want to get mad at God. But who are you to tell God how something should go? We think because we serve him that we deserve these blessings. Baby, you deserve death. And thanks to Jesus, you no longer have that on your head. Punishment was what you deserved. Forgiveness and mercy was the gift you received. And because Joseph decided to serve God despite of his circumstances, God matched his faith in obedience and showed out on Joseph's behalf. That is the character of Christ. So I pray that if this message found you, that no matter where you are, choose to be obedient in this season. Because if you sow a seed of obedience, you will reap a harvest that you can't even fathom. We have to be about our Father's business despite the circumstances. As Christians, we were not supposed to have it all laid out, butterflies and rainbows. But we have hope in Christ Jesus. Stay steadfast to your faith. Pull in, lean into your Father in this time of hopelessness, in the time of uncertainty, and watch him show himself faithful to you. Have a good day. Bye.